Welcome, Grace Life Church. Welcome to another Wednesday night. Welcome to another Get to Know You episode. Today we have Bill Betancourt with us. So say hi, Bill.
Good evening.
So, as you know, we have been interviewing different people in the church, and we've got to get to know different people, whether that was Beverly, who's one of our greeters, and how quirky and fun she is, or we got to get to know Alex, who is newer to the church, but has definitely a very different background from life. And now this week, if you guys might recognize Bill from, he is one of our guitar players on the stage. And he's also, I would consider one of my great friends and a great inspiration to me. So I'm actually very excited for this interview and this opportunity to talk with Bill. So before we get into it, you wanted to start off with some scriptures to kind of preface part of your life. So did you want to start that out?
Thank you, yes. And got to say, I'm a little nervous. And I think I'll loosen up here, but I'll get the rhythm going here in a few moments.
Yeah, don't worry, it's just us having a conversation. It'll be great, and it's going to be awesome.
I think my heart and my head is around. I just retired. I'll be 2 years retired in June, and at some point you begin to look back and look at how God has ordered your steps and organized your life. And so there's some scriptures clearly that indicate, Proverbs 16:9 says, in your hearts you plan your own course, but the Lord will establish your steps. Or 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. And there's just countless scriptures that reinforce that thought, and it seems like it's only when you've got a decade or two or three behind you, you can realize, I wouldn't be here if this hadn't preceded it, and I couldn't have ordered it or organized it. It had to be God's handiwork. So I think that's kind of the theme of where my head is and my heart is in our story time today.
Yeah, and I think one of a great verse that I love to always look at is, I'm not going to think of the reference, but it talks about, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. And the reason I like that is that word workmanship at that point it's a Greek word poema, and it's where we get the word poem from. And so we are literally God's work of art. And like you said, it's not until we get certain places in our life, and I've just started getting to the point now where I get to look back in my life and just on like the past decade, because I'm only in my second decade of life, is looking back to the past decade and just seeing literally where God is and everything, and you start getting to see that. And really, your life is just almost constructed like a poem by God, and it's so beautifully laid out and orchestrated, and it's really cool to see. And it's awesome that now at like retirement age, which is funny enough something I'm already looking forward to, because I'm always the type that I'm like, I'd love to retire and just rest. But it's cool that you get to look back at that now and really see a huge painting of your life.
And I kind of feel like it's a boring story. It's like I didn't have significant, horrific things that I came from and came out of. So I hope it's not too mundane here tonight.
I had a youth leader in Vermont, and he always felt that his story was very boring. And his wife came from a background where her story would have been what we would have said maybe was more colorful or exciting. And she said the thing that drew her to him most was the fact that his story was so consistent, that it was so faithful. You just saw the faithfulness of God throughout it, that it wasn't full of all these ups, downs, twists, turns, but he was someone that was steady and consistent. And that's why she knew that she could marry him, was that he was someone that was consistent and steady. And I think that in that, like, oftentimes people are like, well, I don't know if my story is exciting in that, but that is so beautiful to see something consistent and true. And that's just one of the natures of God, is that we know that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that should be reflected in the lives of believers, that we're not all up and down, left and right, but we can live that consistent life. Because I'm sure there are still things that happened in your life, but you stayed to that consistent course.
I want to frame it that way. Yeah, thank you. And I think I'd start with my family. I grew up with a mom and a dad in the house. I've got two older sisters and a younger brother. My oldest sister, I only discovered many, many years later from my dad's first very short marriage. I don't know the full story, but something happened, and it was like, I believe it was an annulment or something. And so later in life, I got to know that sister. So my more cohesive family was an older sister and a younger brother, and I was a middle child. So maybe that's part of my story too. But anyway.
Did you, real quick to interrupt, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
it's all
just
right.
curious, did you feel that very like middle child like feel from your family, or was it much more of like, because some people they feel like that stereotypical middle child, like they're kind of like left out, they're not the oldest, so they're not the favorite, and they're not the youngest, so they're not getting all the attention. Did you feel that way or no?
I didn't. No, I at some point in my story, I felt like I was the responsible son, maybe the oldest in that hierarchy, the ordering. But I think as a middle child, I was the peacemaker, or concerned about people and are they okay? Are they getting along? Or, some things that we carry that we shouldn't. But I remember just good family interactions. There was nothing horrible. My dad loved my mom. Mom loved dad. He cared about the kids. Family was a priority. I remember growing up in the country, in a little place not far out of Merced, kind of in a little country town, it had a cafe, a gas station, a grocery store, that kind of a little hub of a community. And I remember even at 5 years old, my first recollection of being responsible was my dad was always wanting to be in a grocery store. He was a hardworking Portuguese, first generation Portuguese, born in the U.S. And a large family, and all the brothers wanted to be their own boss, whether it was auto mechanic or dairy, grocery, you name it. And I remember his first little country store. I remember about age 5, I was sorting bottles back in the day when you paid a deposit on the bottle and you'd bring it back, and it had a silly little dim light bulb and a dirt floor. And I thought I was big stuff because I could sort bottles and do some work. So that was kind of my first interaction as the responsible kiddo. But family was always a happy place. I remember a little country church that my mom would take us to. My dad, being Portuguese, he was born into a Catholic family, and not that they practiced what you and I know of as faith and church and our Bible and learning and growing. And so Mom, who was a Protestant, was the outcast. Mm-hmm. And I think she took a little bit of heat and grief from the family, and Dad still, didn't harm the relationship at all. I don't believe it did. Dad converted eventually, but he was never a big church goer. So Mom, thank God for our mothers, right?
Yeah.
She was always ready to get the kids dressed and get to church. And I remember a little country church that we attended, and it was the good old Assemblies of God Pentecostal thing. And we all have stories of Pentecostal environments. But I remember, I think at 5, giving if there was ever a moment of formal dedication, I think I was about 5 years old. And, I didn't have to walk away from any bad life experience. I was just born into it and grateful for that. So
I think that's an amazing testimony in of itself, because there are so many things that we see, especially in our society, and our culture and media is always ready to throw negative things in us because it's kind of what draws us in. And so much that I get thrown at me from like my friends that aren't believers a lot of times, they're like, oh, I just heard about another pastor having this scandal and this other issue and this fall. And so to say that you grew up in a country church where the people in that church were people that you could look up to, that taught you well, that you didn't have a bad experience, I think is really great. So I think that's just an awesome testimony of God, of that you got to have that heritage of faith of growing up, and that your mom was someone, because I think it's very true, like you said, thank God for moms. And for any of you that grew up in like a household where your dad wasn't really into church, but your mom was, that you went to church every Sunday, because if mom was into church, you were going.
Right.
So I think that's an awesome heritage to have.
So it was a good life. I appreciate it, and the older you get, the more you appreciate some of those years. Uh, Now I'm married, a wonderful lady. We've been married 46 years. This year will be 46 years.
Wow, congratulations.
And I've got to always run the numbers and hope I don't get in trouble. Um, we have 2 sons. They're both married with families. One lives here in Lincoln, one lives in Roseville. We live in Rockland, so it's nice to have
Everyone's
proximity.
nearby.
And we have 7 grandkids, and our kids are important to us. Our grandkids are important to us, and we enjoy being empty nesters. But when you look back at this point, you wonder, how did you get through it? All of the busy weekends with sports and what have you, and still finding time to make life work. So it's kind of boring. Sorry, folks, but it's just I kind of feel like it was just kind of a do-de-do.
Say, I think a lot of people can identify with that in life, though. I mean, there's many times in life where we feel our lives are very boring or mundane, but there is still also that very real struggle to get through the mundane, to
Yeah.
get through the typical, to get through all of that. And I do want to talk about that, but one thing I am curious about, because you kind of glossed over, you got very much when you were a kid and growing up a little, but I'm kind of curious, what were you like growing up, like teenage years? Were you into sports? Were you into guitars? Because we know you as a guitar player now.
Good
Was that something that you were always into? Were you wanting to be like the next Led Zeppelin, like Jimi Hendrix? Like, what was your kind of teenage years growing up?
Good question. I was a smart kid in school. School was easy. I think I picked up the guitar 4th, 5th grade. Took a few lessons and didn't like lessons at all. So didn't do much with the guitar except strum a little bit. I think it was when the 8th grade came along and I landed in another location as we moved. Dad had a store that I mentioned already, and then a second and a third took us to Tracy, California. And at that point, as an 8th grader, I began to get involved in the church youth group that had a youth choir, that had some activities that drew me in, and a good youth leader, youth director. And so I began to pick up more interest in the guitar at that point, and enjoyed it because it was an outlet. It was working with other youth, and it was a mission and a passion. I think eventually my idols were the guys like James Taylor, some of that folk rock. I kind of feel like I've missed the rock and roll because I sheltered myself from the craziness of some of that. And I think that's why I love the acoustic so much. I have other guitars. I have electric and things but I'm not the wild Led Zeppelin kind of a player. And that's fine. I think I found my lane, and it feels good and it feels comfortable. But growing up, I was kind of a responsible kid. It was in that 3rd store my dad had, became a high school student, that I began to say, I've got an afternoon job. I'm going to buy a better guitar. I'm going to buy a nice stereo. I'm going to buy a car. I felt good about being able to earn money and be responsible that way. And so it was a good. I look back now with wonderful, fond memories of those years working in a family grocery store. It was a little place, kind of like, it was during an era when a small grocery store, you could still make a living. I learned how to cut meat from my father. We had produce. We had a full line of grocery. It was a time when you would have charge accounts with people in town or farmers, and it was always on a handshake. It was never an application to fill out.
Yeah.
And it was an era where you would deliver groceries to somebody's home and you could take it in and leave it on their counter, and you didn't have to worry about things you do now.
Yeah. I think it's funny because a lot of people would look at me and think that because I am so ingrained with technology that I love the technology era, but I so much wish that I could have had something much more like that, the local small town feel where, yeah, you did have those charge accounts, that you did have that kind of atmosphere. And my dad grew up in, I remember he worked at a Hallmark store, which is not like a greeting card store. It was like a butcher shop. Mm-hmm. And so he got to do all those things, and they had those very small town feel, and he grew up in a small town. And so those stories are always ones that draw me in. And I love watching movies like that where And I mean, there's this movie Pleasantville that kind of mocks that like small town-esque feel and everything. But in reality, a lot of it is, I was like, man, I kind of wish I could have had those like gentler times, those nice times where there was just that camaraderie. And I think it's funny because you were talking about like what you did with your money when you first got it and everything. And then I was just thinking, I'm like, man, I made poor choices when I first got a job. I started buying like the dumbest things. I bought like knives, throwing axes. I would like have like dominoes show up at like school, like at the tennis courts. We're supposed to be doing tennis practice. And they'd be like, who ordered like a large pizza? Like, and all these other things. My teammates are just looking at me. I'm like, oh, that's me. Like, that was my responsibility level. So I think you chose what was better and right.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, as I tried to create some notes that I would follow and maintain a course that was that you could follow, or those listening might be able to follow. So I hope I'm staying somewhat close to those, but I'll double check now and then and see if I'm on track. We from 8th grade and then through high school, I met my wife, Debbie. We were high school sweethearts.
Oh.
Yeah. And, you know, when you think about God ordering your life and you look back and you wonder what were some of those linking pins, she was dating a guy who played guitar. And he and I became buddies because we both played guitar. And he was leaving the state and said, you know, Bill, watch out for my girl, you know, take care of my girl. And so there you go. It's,
I mean, you've kept that promise.
I maintained my promise, yeah. And it was all fine. It was good. He was not coming back, and she was, I think, ready for a new guy that was going to be who I was. So, so as I went through high school, we married young. We were just a year out of high school when we married. So we still had some growing up to do, which was fine. I think we just wanted to be together and knew that we wouldn't have kids immediately. We would need to finish college, do some of those things to get ourselves established. Hopefully we'd get our finances in order, get a home started, you know, things like that. So we went to Bethany Bible College that was in the Santa Cruz Hills. Maybe you know it. Assemblies affiliated. And as a music major, which I didn't hang with that. And, you know, kind of a ministerial spin as well, which I didn't do well with either. There was a time when when we left there to get married and work and establish ourselves, I still felt kind of a yearning and a churning to do church work. So we were involved, deeply involved with things like Sunday school teaching and the junior high group and the board of trustees, and she was the secretary for the church. And I played in the worship band, you know, and we sang in the choir, and we were busy, probably busier than we needed to be, but it was okay. And it was before we had kids, too. I think once we had kids, we knew we couldn't stay that committed to so many activities. So anyway, left Bethany Bible College and went to work several years, and then started taking courses at night to finally finish a degree. And finished with University of San Francisco in Human Resources and Organizational Behavior. Kind of a long title, but I felt like it was generic enough that it would work for me. Didn't know if I wanted to be forever in a grocery store business, which I still was through high school and even those young adult years.
Were you still working at like your dad's grocery store?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was and I felt a real bond there. It was fun to be there with the family. It was that community feeling, and you knew your customers. And you know, it wasn't a union shop. I wasn't going to make a lot of money, but there was still a connection, and it was good. At the time, I think I went through several things like, what else could I do with myself? What else can I do? What else can I be? And part of that was the ministry question. And actually was licensed eventually using the Berean correspondence course. And I kind of felt like that was a shortened version of a better education to be a minister. So anyway, I almost secured a position as a youth pastor in Modesto. Something happened, and looking back, I know it was the hand of God. It fell through, and shortly after that, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. So I knew my commitment there with the family business was important, more so than before, to be close to him and what was happening in Mom. And Mom, backstepping just a little bit, Mom was of that mindset that she didn't want to work outside the home. She wanted to be home with the kids. But she did things like she was a seamstress, she was a cake decorator, sold Tupperware and Avon and things like that. And then eventually in that third grocery store, she was our secretary, kind of the accountant person, and worked in the store more because we were now grown and involved in working in the store ourselves. But he got cancer, so I thought, this is where I need to be. This is where I should be. I wasn't driven to go into the ministry. And I think, well, I guess that's okay. And a good friend of mine who was on staff there in the youth department, he says, well, Bill, you'll know if it's meant to be, you won't be happy or fulfilled doing anything else. And I thought that was wise advice, good counsel. And so that's kind of how that secondary career kind of fell off track, which was okay. I've made peace with that. No guilt at all.
I was going to say, yeah, I think my dad always told us, because he got the advice when he was younger, as a friend of his in ministry always told him, like, if you can do anything else besides ministry and be happy, do that. And it's because there are a lot of things that come with ministry,
Yeah.
and if there's he always said, like, if there's anything else you could do besides ministry and be happy, do that. And I think that's one of those things that sometimes some things just fall off in life, and
Yeah.
it's okay to let them go, because
Right.
God has a plan for our life, and he's not worried. He's like, oh no, something fell off. Like, no,
Right.
because God has a plan for us, and if something falls off and he's fine with it, it's obviously something he was fine with it falling off.
Right. And that's, there's a scripture that talks about how I've ordered your days and ordained you for the work you'll do. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm not a Billy Graham, and that's fine, but I'm a grocery guy for a while. That's okay. But I had that backdrop of teaching in church and thought, well, maybe I could be a teacher in a public school. And so one day, this was after Dad passed away, and Mom wasn't interested in being in the store anymore. So I felt like it was my own, but it was a long days, long week. I'd have to go in early and fill the meat case in the morning on a Sunday to get the rest of the day off. And then you're exhausted, But so anyway, I would get, in those days, you'd get a newsletter from Northern California Grocers Association. It was like this, stapled, and it came in the mail. And it would talk about stores that were opening or stores closing or auctions. If you needed equipment, you could find out where an auction was. And it had a spot, like if you were looking for a job somewhere, you could maybe find that. Well, I found at the bottom of one of the last pages, and again, this was thinking about what am I going to be next? And it was teaching in adult education how to work in that arena, how to manage yourself in a retail place. And I called the phone number, and I actually got right into the classroom to a guy who was trying to retire. And told him my story, and he says, I think this is a good match. He said, why don't you call my principal, and I'll give it a good word as well. So that's how I migrated out of the grocery store into teaching adults. And the match was like, it was a little mock grocery store where you taught different things about marketing and display and counting money, literally counting it back. So I thought, I don't know, I'll give this a try. I'm just tired of doing this. And I'd get weekends off, and I'd get vacation time, and I'd get holidays off. So something drew me into that. I look back now, and I can see how God's hand was in this too. So I landed there, and it took me a while to settle into this other new career, because teaching was different than teaching in church. Some of the adults maybe didn't want to be there, but they were an arm twist to get them there, or maybe they were getting subsidy for going to school. So anyway, I started there in Sac City, and then while there at that campus, moved into teaching GED for those who hadn't finished high school, and then moved into, they were building a career center for those trying to make a career change. And I thought, well, I know what that's about. I should consider applying for that. So I made these short little migrative steps there, and eventually realized I wanted to do more than just classroom. I wanted to manage the campus. So I moved into administration as a vice principal in Sac City, eventually went into the San Juan district, that's a neighboring district. And still, this is all adult education. And I think God knew that I could manage myself there. I don't think I could have managed myself in K-12. My wife works there. She's got quite a story of moving through that area and became a superintendent herself. But I don't think I could have managed the kids, the parents, there was a different set of politics and things that I don't think I would have had the passion for or the patience for. So God kind of helped me land in another place. So thinking about things that I'd done in the grocery store, one of the first things I had to do when I landed that job teaching in this little pretend grocery store was I had to put it together. They moved it from one building to another, and the principal says, "Hey, can you set it up?" I said, "Well, yeah, sure I can." And so I look back and I go, all those auctions we went to, all the equipment we bought, all the shelving we replaced, all the counters we replaced, all of that stuff was not foreign to me. So I could do this. And then the Career Center, then I thought, well, I've never done that, but I can find my way through this. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's awesome that you just mentioned that. It's like all the things that you had done had prepared you for where you were. And I think that's so true in all of our lives, is that God always prepares us for where he's taking us. And God is never going to bring you somewhere and be like, I have called you to this, now just figure it out. He's going to prepare us and prepare our hearts. And I think it's really cool also that you are working in adult education, because so often we look at the church and we're like, well, a pastor's got the highest priority job of all of like ministering to our spirits, but we are made of spirit, soul, and body. And there's a huge part of us that needs to know those practical things. And the Bible says you don't work, you don't eat. Right. And so getting to teach people how to work, how to present themselves, how to build those skills for those that missed out on schooling, that's so amazing, because it's a ministry unto itself, and it's discipleship in reality. Is discipleship is taking someone along and teaching them what you know. And it's cool that you got to do ministry in that way.
And that's what I thought. It came to me that this is kind of its own mission field. These are people that feel lost or broken, you name it, countless things. They didn't finish high school, or they're needing a new career, need technical skills, or they're an immigrant coming from another country, need to learn the language. And so I felt like I was in a good place, not in professional paid ministry, but in a layman's ministry spot where I could still feed a soul of sorts, you know. So I kind of, again, looking back, I saw how God got me to that point. So just as I moved through retiring after 30 years in education, I went into education at about 32, I guess. Some years teaching, and then moved into administration. And during those years, there were ups and downs with the budget. And there were times when I had to close a campus, or move a campus, or times we were able to build a new campus, go in and actually start a new campus. So I look at the things that what came to mind was the scripture that says, I go before you and I go behind you, and I prepared the way for you. And I look at, none of those things seemed impossible or difficult. It was like I could do a slingshot with stones, and I could manage this giant because I've done something similar before, you know. So through all those closing and opening of campuses over time, over 30 years, I eventually landed up in Auburn. So I went from Sac City to San Juan, and then to Placer Unified School District, Union High School District. And they had a small program, and the budget, we had like a 10-year problem with funding not being enough. So it was this decline, which was tough. It was tough. And at some point, we finally got some better monies coming in, and I was able to help build a campus. And that was exciting because not only could I build a campus, but I could build a career center. And that was 2 different locations. And again, I thought, this is God's handiwork, that I had something that I've done before that's similar and familiar, and could bring that to a new location where I don't have to worry and be afraid or feel like I'm really out there. So as I finished up in adult education, I was able to leave on a high point after having built a couple of new campuses and new services, and I look back and I go, wow. And I don't, sometimes I thought I might put some of this story, as you can journal, write, and maybe put it into some kind of a better form than this, and leave it for my kids so they know that, trust God, the scripture that says, the steps of a righteous man are ordered by God. Delight yourself in the Lord and He'll direct your path. So many things that are real. They're, He's made us a promise that He'll take care of us. In Jeremiah, He talks about, how I have a plan for you to prosper you and give you hope in a future. And, I couldn't have ordered my life so well if I had to do it. And there were times when I was just going, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But I landed where I landed and moved at the right time. And there was always some peace about it, or you wouldn't have made that move or shift. And so anyway, just go ahead.
I think one of the things that I see about your life is, and it's something that I definitely, it's not me, and it's something that I think I wish I could be, but it's just your life strikes me as something so beautifully humble before God. And I struggle with, one, humility in general, of just being like, it's all of us. It's definitely not me. It's like that, like, pride part of you is just like, no, I want to. And so one of the things I admire about your life, or like even arguing with God, is that I argue with Him all the time of like, no, my ideas I think is going to be better if you would just trust me. Like, I think I know what's better. And just hearing your story, it's so beautifully humble before God and submitted to Him. Of you didn't need to feel the need to try and assert your way of like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you followed, where God led you, and you followed that peace and where He was. And there is just that still small voice that brings peace and comfort. And if you listen to it, it's so easy to follow, and life is much more peaceful that way. Yeah. And I'm someone so much, and I'm very glad that God is blunt with me so often, because I kick against the goads, and I'm like, we're going to do it this way. And I come back after trying, and I'm like, that didn't work. And God's like, you want to do it the easy way now, like the right way? And hearing your life and your story, it's just, to me, it's so beautifully humble before God, and it's wonderful.
I have peace with it, and I look back at humble beginnings, if you want to frame it that way, a little small country store. Adult ed usually gets a hand-me-down campus or an old cottage home that you've turned into classroom space. And to me, that always felt okay. I didn't need a new grocery store. I didn't need to open a new supermarket. I didn't need all of that to feel like I was doing okay. When I finally left, I think God gave me some of that. We actually went into a retail center to open a career center, and it was like the nicest place I'd ever worked. And I felt like, oh my gosh, this is pretty sweet. And then the campus, we were able to re-outfit and clean it up and really do some great things there. It was the nicest campus I'd ever worked at, type of thing. So it was kind of like God restores. Mm-hmm. And so I look back and I'm grateful for all of that. And then if I can shift a little bit, maybe I'll come back to something here about that part of my career. But I think even my music, when I look back and how I met my wife, it had something related to music: guitar, choir, singing, youth group at the church, naturally. But my mom and my aunt sang in church, in that little country church. And you've heard of Sister Harmony, how nobody can harmonize as much as sisters can. And they weren't super musicians of any kind. They just enjoyed singing in church, and we had a small organ in the house, and I kind of played with that and got my bearings, and then finally got a guitar, and then finally, moved into some other more focused work with the guitar. Always in church. I thought I wanted to be a great musician that could make a living at it, but that was just casual thinking because I knew that was a rough life. And I didn't want to do that to my family or myself. And I thought, you know what? Just being able to play and edify others is just a blessing, and it gives me everything I need. And so I don't feel like I missed much. I spent a lot of years in a garage band with some other guys who were Christian players. We probably could have earned a doctoral degree 2 times over. We spent so many hours. But that's okay. It was part of growing up. But music has always been a part of what I needed. And for a long time, for about a decade, I was playing in a large church in the area on the main stage. And I think one of the questions we might get to is, how did you land here at Grace Life, right? So I was playing in another church for a long time and then began to age out. I was not asked to play as often. And, and then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel good. But I was still practicing at home and playing, and I do a lot of chord melody work, which is, like solo instrumental stuff. And I thought, okay, well, I can keep some chops together on that. It's not like playing in a band, but it's okay. And I played in this other church with our keyboard fellow, Frank Scales. And he like me, finally was moved out. And one day he and I bumped into each other. Debbie and I, after church, had gone to a little restaurant, and he was in there waiting for his wife, I think, to show up for lunch too. And we were kind of bemoaning that, the good old days, we don't. But he mentioned that he was playing here. And, I had to reckon with making peace with that change, not being able to play like I thought I still had a ministry location. And so we just chatted for a little while, not long. And within a few days of that, a week or two, he called me up and said, hey, Bill, we could use an acoustic guitar in our band. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, of course I would be interested. And so when I landed here, I thought, oh, I feel like I've come home again. I feel like I landed back. The little country church was not this nice. It wasn't this big. But it kind of feels like I've come back to a place that has, it just was the right time to be somewhere. And I needed a band of brothers and a band of sisters, so to speak. And to be able to be a part of Grace Life Church that way is really special for me. And there was a time when I was praying and seeking God, and I said, I don't know what to do, but I don't know where to go. I don't know what I can be, where I don't feel like I'm released from this, because I've always been a part of a worship band. And call it a vision, call it a dream, call it my psyche working overtime. But I remember dreaming, had a dream when, as we look out here, it's kind of dark. We've got lights on us, but it's kind of dark here. But in that dream, I saw hands lifted and people praising and worshiping God, and I was playing the guitar. And then some other time, that sweet, still, small, quiet voice, it was like he said to me, I've got a spot for you. You don't have to worry about that. I've got a place for you. Well, and here we are. Here we are. So I feel lucky and blessed and fortunate to be a part of this family here.
And God doesn't forget us for 1 second. We are honored and blessed to have you here. And I definitely think there are a lot of churches that are focused on we have to have a certain presentation of look. And like you said, people get aged out. But we are honored to have, and it's one of the things that even the sound booth and the music, we'll talk about, is that we are so blessed to have the talented band that we have. Because for those of you that don't realize that a church this size doesn't normally have a band this astounding, and you guys don't know or realize how often in the audience things just change completely on the fly. And it takes people of your caliber and experience and talent to be able to all of a sudden switch all the chords around to start a song that you don't have any chords for, and you're like, oh, we're playing this song now. Okay, what are the chords? We'll follow along. And you guys do that seamlessly and beautifully. And I also just want to say your whole life is something that just seems very much in service to God, of investing in people. And I mean, we were talking about this before, and what some of you don't know is I've shared a little bit of my testimony about how I went through a lot of depression at one point and was very ready to end my life. And one of the people that reached out to me was Bill. And your life has and it made a huge difference. And your life has been investing into people. You invested into the adults that at some point society kind of disregards and casts aside, and you invest in people through your music. And I know in more areas that you have like played your music, and we can talk about that. And even into me, and it's changed my life, and I can't imagine how many countless other people's lives you've changed by the investment you've made. And it's just cool to see how God has worked through you being that consistent person, because if you hadn't been that consistent person, like when I was going through everything and you would want to talk to me and you were like someone that was like flaky up and down, like I couldn't have put that trust in you. But this consistency that I see is just so beautiful in how God works through you.
Thank you. It was a meaningful time for me to hang out with you for lunches, and it was good. It was good. And even when you look at the disciples, there were the brothers of thunder, and then there were the quiet ones that were, they didn't want the fanfare. They didn't need to be front and center, but they were the one you could count on. I hope that's the kind of disciple that I would have been. Was just let me know what I can do. You want me to go gather some bread and some fish? I'll go gather the bread and fish. But don't ask me to do exceedingly, and then that's just, we all have our, I don't know, we just, some people will do that because they're wired that way. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was always fine being in the little country store, the little schoolhouse that was a hand-me-down campus. And I feel really blessed to be here. The musicians that I can be a part of are stellar. They're really good. And I think if God had landed me in a place where it's like, here, Bill, you're going to direct some worship, bring your guitar and sing a few tunes, would not have been as fulfilling. I just know what I needed was the caliber of music and direction that we have here, and I feel really, really fortunate. And music has always been special. I think you might have been ready to pull something else out of me, but like, what are you doing since you've been retired, right? Yeah. Well, one of the things I thought I would do in retirement was give more time to the guitar, because when you've got a young family, you're paying bills, fighting commute and paying taxes, you don't always have time to pick up your instrument. And so finally I thought, well, in retirement, I'll have time to give more focus time. And so one thing I was able to do for a while before COVID impacted us was I was able to volunteer Kaiser and play soft, quiet instrumentals in the lobby. And again, that was just, low key. It was quiet. People would wander through. They might sit down. They might stop and walk by and come back because they heard music. But almost every time I was there, you'd get something from someone that you knew you touched them. One story I can share was I knew the guy was probably going through some chemo or cancer treatment because he shuffled in that hospital garb, and his wife was there to see him, and they sat down not far away, and they had their conversation, and I knew that his life was in a place that must have been horrific, going through what he was doing. And they finished up, and she went off to do something else, and he shuffled back this way to get to his room. And as much as he was going through, he turned to me and looked at me with eye contact and quietly said with a smile, "Thank you. Thank you." And I thought, oh, this was worth it all. This was worth it. And so that's just, what am I doing since I've retired? More time with the guitar. Been enjoying reading more than ever before. we've got dogs, a couple of large dogs, a Labrador and a Shepherd. And my routine is often that I take them with me and we go to a place where I can sit outside with them. And I take a book, and it's a quiet time for reading and kind of a reflection and devotional. And it's more time with Debbie, more time with grandkids. So I feel like now I can hang out with my friend the guitar more than I used to. So I feel really blessed and really lucky and really fortunate.
Say we're running out of time, but I mean, you're someone that I can talk to endlessly, and I enjoy it. And I mean, one of the things I was excited about this is that because I've gotten to get to know you over our lunches and different times of interaction, and I'm excited for people in Grace Life to get to know you just a little bit, and hopefully they'll come up and talk to you because you're a very friendly and outgoing person. But one of the things that I've asked people throughout this entire series, whenever I have the opportunity, is what is your favorite verse and why? And I think this reveals a lot about us and our relationship with God, and also gives you an opportunity to just kind of share a bit about God. So what is your favorite verse and why?
And that's a hard question. I knew you were going to ask that. It's like, oh, I don't know. I like that one, but I like that one. It's hard, but I think in staying true to this theme and this topic, I come back to Psalms 37 that says, "The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. Though they stumble, they will never fall, for the Lord holds them by the hand." So even though I grew up in church, there are times when you're not burning hot for God, and you may not have been, where you wanted to be. So you might stumble, but you didn't fall, and He was there to hold your hand. And so I feel like He's always taking care of me and my family, and I feel really, really blessed.
Yeah, that's a great verse, and I love what you said, that like God's it's the faithfulness of God, and He is faithful to the 1,000th generation, and we know that if we're faithful to Him, He will be faithful to our children and their children's children. And I mean, you can never outdo the generosity and faithfulness of God. Of we steward our lives in a way to honor Him, and He just takes care of the rest. And I think it's a very beautiful verse you brought in.
And one more verse, and I can't give you the scripture reference, but He can do exceeding abundantly above all that we can ask or think. I heard one minister split that apart, and he said, now, the writer of that could have said, He can do everything for us. But he used those pretty descriptive words, exceedingly all that we need, or abundantly all that we need, or above what we can ask. And so it's like he's layered, and He goes before us, and he puts some things in order. Like when I called in and found that I was talking with the guy who was trying to retire, and I ended up in his classroom teaching. So many things that I reflect on. It was like He was able to do exceeding and abundantly above all that I would have thought in orchestrating my steps throughout life. And I feel so fortunate, so lucky, so blessed. So,
Well, gosh, there's so many things I'd love to talk to you about more, and we're out of time. But I want to thank you for your time and your just vulnerability. And I know you mentioned at the beginning you were kind of like nervous, and I'm glad that you did do this, though, because we get to see your heart. And there are probably a lot of people that might feel like you, that you said that to you it seems like a very like even life, nothing exciting. But to me, like I said, that consistency was something that was so crucial to me at a very important point in my life. And I'm honored that I got to do this with you, and I'm thankful for your time. And I just appreciate it so much.
thank you. I'm glad I could be here with you.
So please continue to join us for these Wednesday night get-to-know-yous. And like I said, there's so many people in our church, and I've said this before, and I'll continue saying it. There's so many people in here that lead incredible lives or have great testimonies like Bill, that unless we as our church take a step out of our comfort zone, invite someone to lunch, get to know them, get to know a person that you're like, hey, they kind of seem scary, or maybe like, hey, they look really friendly. Just take a step and ask them to go to lunch, get to know them, and you'll be amazed at what God will do in and through that friendship and what will happen. So thank you for joining us for our Wednesday night, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.